Okay, and now we'll get started with the fundraising session Q&A with the Smithsonian team. Hi, everybody. My name is Hessa Valle. I'm part of the Uplift leadership team as the program coordinator. I'll pass it off to Taylor.
Hi, everybody. I am also a part of Uplift. I am a project specialist, and I am here to help Hessa today. And I will pass it off to Hallie.
Thanks, Taylor. Hi, everybody. I think I know most of you. I'm Hallie Butfin from the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, and I met most of y'all teaching workshops on creating engaging festivals in August. So I am very thrilled that I have some wonderful Smithsonian colleagues with us today who are actual experts in fundraising. I did a little fundraising myself, but I'm really delighted to have folks that work every day living and breathing this really important work. So I want to hand it over first to Haley Francis, who is our Major Gifts Officer in my office, to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Haley Francis. I lead our fundraising and philanthropic partnerships at the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage.
Thanks.
Am I supposed to pass it off to someone?
Go ahead, yeah.
Well, I guess I'll pass it off to Elena.
Sure. Hi, nice to meet everyone. My name is Elena Gibbs. I work at the Smithsonian as well in our Central Office of Advancement and manage the Smithsonian National Board, which is a group of about 50 board members, volunteers from across the country that support Smithsonian initiatives across the institution. So nice to be with you all today.
Thanks, Elena. And Loretta, who is running in places in New York City right now. I'm so happy she could join us.
Hi, everyone. The Prince and Kate have destroyed my hotel, so we can't get in until 3 o'clock. I'm here during Climate Week and United Nations, so it's a little hectic, but I worked for the Smithsonian in 3 different divisions with the Smithsonian Folklife Festival as the Director of Development for 5 years. And I am now a private consultant working with several different organizations, but I'm excited to talk to everyone. You guys are from my neck of the woods.
Thanks for joining us, Loretta. All right. So I'm going to open it up to the floor first for questions in case anybody wants to start us off. We're here to talk specifically about fundraising. So we welcome you to kind of bring questions to us. We had a couple questions that folks sent to us, so I'm going to turn to those if no one starts, but I want to open up the floor first in case anybody wants to get started. So I'm going to take one from the questions that you all submitted. So we've got a question in here. Actually, this one's from Eileen about the best way or time to approach donors and ways to recognize them. So I want to open it up to all three of my colleagues. So we've got, so in the room with us are festival organizers from across North Carolina. So this question is really about folks that are organizing festivals. Maybe let's go. So there's a couple questions in there. What's the best way to approach donors? What's the best time frame to approach donors? Anyone want to tackle that with some ideas? You think Loretta started?
I'm happy to jump in.
Sure.
If I were going to give anyone advice, it's the best way to approach a donor is find someone else who knows that donor. An introduction is going to get you 10 times further than you just going on knocking on someone's door. That way that person can explain who you are, what you're about. And there's a high likelihood that the person you're approaching, if this is just completely not their bailiwick, they're going to say no, and it's going to not waste your time. So the second part of the question then is the best time as far out in advance as you can. It's just not fair to go to someone and your event is going to be happening a month from now, and because it comes off more like you are in dire need rather than a good planner. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Loretta. Elena or Haley, do you have any experience you want to share in that space?
I definitely agree with what Loretta said. It's always nice to have that personal introduction. However, in some cases, when you don't have that, another route you can take is, of course, cold outreach. I have found success in reaching out directly to donors who are interested in, and make sure that you have a really compelling opener when you send an email so that they know exactly what you were reaching out for and give them a reason to want to respond to you. And as far as timing, again, you want to make sure that, with corporations, they have annual budgets. So you just want to make sure that you're able to have conversations as early as possible so that they can properly fiscally or add you into their fiscal planning for the year. They typically have a marketing team that handles these sort of relationships with members of the community who they may want to get brand visibility with. And so I would highly recommend just making sure that you give yourself at least, I would recommend at least 12 months before your event so that you know kind of where you fit within their planning. And they will tell you, hey, we're coming up against the end of our fiscal year, or we're going to start a new fiscal year. And they'll kind of give you a sense for whether or not it's feasible, but at least it gives you a little time to pivot if necessary, or come back to them that next year for sponsoring one of your events.
And I'll chime in and, definitely echo and agree with everything that Loretta and Haley mentioned. And then also say that, another way to go about it as well is to engage and leverage your leadership within your institution. Finding ways or organic ways for them to reach out, even if it is, a bit of a cold call or cold outreach. But oftentimes, prospective donors are receptive to leadership reaching out, introducing themselves, talking about why a project or initiative is important to the organization and aligned with the broader goals of the institution. That's something that as fundraisers, we can certainly articulate and echo. But I will say that there is a bit of muscle when you have leadership involved in having folks at every part of the organization, people that oversee the organization that are involved with those initial requests, can be helpful when appropriate. And then in terms of lead time, I would agree as much lead time as possible. And one thing that I find to be effective, particularly with board members and volunteers, is sort of providing updates along the way on the project, giving them a bit of the behind the scenes through those updates to give them a sense of not only the progress, but how, their support or potential support is helping to fuel that activity.
Thanks so much, Alina. Since we have you, I'm really curious because we talked during the trainings about how important it is when you're organizing festivals. A lot of folks here are looking at festivals that are pretty small. And so sometimes thinking about our Smithsonian experience, I'm always curious of how we can kind of take the big framework of the way the Smithsonian operates and where there might be lessons for folks that are working in small communities. And I'm curious because our board is really important for fundraising for the Smithsonian, right? Like you were talking about having those individuals and managing that board, and that those individuals have their own networks. And I'm curious if you think that is there a small, or like some kind of iteration for that you could see might be helpful for somebody who's organizing a festival in a community versus like our big institutional scale?
Absolutely. I would say identify those that are most passionate about what you're doing. That could look like a board. It could look like an advisory group. I think, we tend to call it board here at the Smithsonian, but really what it is, it's people that are willing to be ambassadors on your behalf. We really think of board members, or actually we call them volunteers as well, as folks that are willing to be, advocates and ambassadors, and then advance our work through philanthropy. So I would say with those three A's, I mean, again, it could be a board member, but I think identifying those folks within your respective networks for your festivals is one way to go about identifying those that would be or could be most helpful to you. It's not always that one person hits, all three of those categories. But if you create a group, even if it's a very small group of advisors who comprise those traits, it ends up being a really good brain trust and a group of ambassadors that support the work that's being done with your festival. So I know board seems like a, very formal term, but I think the principles of what we ask, board members to, or the ways in which we ask board members to support us, I think that cuts across the work that all of us do here.
Thank you for that. I think that really helps brings it to a very relevant level. I'm curious on that last part of the question about recognizing donors. I'm going to put Loretta on the spot here because I met her when she was working on the festival last year, and she gave me some really creative ideas of things that she had done in the past to recognize donors. And so can you give us some examples of some of these wild things? Like, what is it that donors want, and what are some ways from like working from the creativity of a festival that you can recognize them?
You first always find out what they like to drink. Okay, and I'm just teasing. Okay, I'm from the hills. I'm from the hills. Everybody's listening to this, so you guys got to laugh a little bit. I, in my time off, when the pandemic happened, I ended up helping, just pro bono help, with a small junior college. It's a full college, but it's a small college called Ferrum College. It's in Ferrum, Virginia, Southwest Virginia. And they do a huge folk life festival. But I was pretty shocked to find out that, like, that was mentioned, there's never been a board for this event. But in this particular case, it wasn't about finding a board as much as was finding people that had enjoyed this festival in the past. And as far as celebrating them, it's very interesting that they were more interested in a front row seat. They were more interested in meeting someone, not when the 10,000 other people were there. It was more about just letting them maybe have a little planning, that we were going to do this. What do you think? Well, we think you should do it like this way. And even though you're going to do it this way, you can direct the person. You can suggest that what they want is what it should be done. And that makes them feel a part of the project. It makes them feel significantly part of the project. Particularly, it's again, and I like what Haley said. We're talking, we come from the Smithsonian, but when you're in a smaller area, it is not incredibly different. It's making people feel special about their gift.
Thank you. And Haley, I know these past couple years in particular, I've seen you at the festival out there walking around with potential donors and stewarding our donors and stewarding our advisory council. What are some of the ways that we have recognized donors?
So one of the ways that we've recognized them is by allowing them to use their logo, or we list all of our donors on our website, and we list the name of donors who gave at, I would say, the lower tiers. But then for those who gave more, we put their name and their logo. And then in addition to that, we have signage at the festival where we have whether it's a foundation, a corporate sponsor, which typically corporate sponsors tend to want more benefits than foundations traditionally, but we have their logos on our festival signage. But we also have we have a main stage where the performances are, where we have like a TV screen where we show commercials for the donors who give at a really high level. So we'll allow them to send over a video promoting their company. And that has been another way that has made donors feel like they really had a strong on-site presence in front of a really large audience. And in addition to that, we have experiences that we've created. For example, on the National Mall, if a chef does a cooking demonstration, they can't necessarily feed the general public afterwards, but we'll have like a behind the scenes chef tasting where we bring our donors, and the chef will have a nice meet and greet and a spread for them to sample food. And that went over really, really well. It's just a nice way to bring them into the experience and make them feel like they have a private moment that feels unique and special. So in addition to the logo in the festival program, the website and the on-site signage and the screen, we also have those behind the scene moments for them as well, in addition to the tours.
I'll chime in there too and say that, I think those are really great ideas. And for those behind the scenes moments, another idea there is that's also an opportunity for recognition with a smaller group. So let's say I'm using totally, this is all hypothetical, but let's say there is a board member who supported a food demonstration, let's say at a festival, using that as a moment for perhaps the chef or perhaps, someone that's involved with the festival to thank them while they're within that smaller group for their support and really for, their passion around the work. So I think using moments of verbal recognition is also important in addition to the signage, which I think for many donors is really wonderful as well. But, typically when there's either introductory remarks or closing remarks, those are great moments just to, thank or reiterate thanks to specific donors.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. That's the one I left out.
Yeah, and on our stages, that's a big opportunity. Well, I want to open it up in case we've been talking about a lot of different examples. Any questions or comments? Any experiences you all want to share?
Ladies, I'll just say thank you for answering the question, since it was my question. And some of the things that you mentioned, we are trying to do. We have a website and we build it as we go. Our event is, I was just looking at the calendar and I was like, oh, it's right at the 6-month mark now. So I feel like I'm a little bit behind on that. It took us, we went through a little bit of transition time this summer. I won't go into the details on that, but that I feel like you never can start soon enough, especially when there's some changes that you're going to make. But we do try and do several tiers of things to recognize people. So it's good to hear that we're on the right track with that. And we try and get different folks on our staff that specialize in different areas to approach those donors that they will have worked with prior to the event or that they might know. So we do try and have a connection and not make cold calls as much as possible. But occasionally that still happens. So anyway, I was trying to think of, I guess one question I have is I'm more of a phone call, face-to-face person on reaching out, particularly if it's somebody that's been a contact and a donor in the past. And I find that other folks are more the email type person, or let's send them a letter. And I think, I don't know, maybe if it is a first time reach on a donor, that might be more appropriate than just, showing up at their place or calling them. But I'd love to have your input on that because, and just see if I'm on base, off base, whatever, with that. Or if you would say, well, I'd start here. And then maybe if you don't hear back by a certain time, then follow up with this step. And, because I don't want to keep bugging people if it's just, not the right time or not the right event. But at the same time, I know how busy we all are. And I've had other people say, oh, I'm so glad that you followed back up. So how do you feel about all that?
Who wants to take that one? Loretta?
I'll jump in. I think one of the marks of a good fundraiser, you just hit it. You've got to read your person, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go back and say something before I talk about how you approach a person. You talked about your 6 months and you're feeling a little nervous now, right? So you're obviously going to have to hit the streets a little bit more, but some of the best places to get another potential donor is one of your donors. And you're just completely honest with them that you want to make this a success. You also are not just selling 1 year. Never go at it like that. Go at it already telling them what you're thinking about doing for the next year, so they can see they're not just investing in a short term, they're investing in something that's going to grow. if you talk about a musician there, or if you're going to have, something for kids, or it's going to be really attractive, make sure you get pictures to let that person know. Send a picture of last year, something that did well with this person that you're not knowing. And that's not just an email. It's, hey, this is what I want to talk to you about. So I went on a little bit off your question, but I think longevity. I think selling years. Give them some stats. Give them stats. The first year we started people. I don't care what the stats are. I don't care the size. You can still make a growth story. Is what I always call it. So those are the things that I would maybe suggest in the way you think about approaching folks. Did that answer? Did I go completely off sideways there?
No, that was very helpful. Yep. And we do have some good statistics from the last event. This is an event we offer it every other year. And of course, I won't even go into COVID got us way off schedule. But I think
how long has the event been? How long has the event been going on?
About 10 years. I think 10. Yeah, I think that's about right.
I would suggest you make up some stats other than just 1 year
From the previous.
Even if you don't have exact. So you can explain that to someone.
Oh,
you
sure.
can go over 3 years. Now, last year we know we have it for Target, but that's the time before that. We believe it grew from here. People love to see growth.
Okay.
It's like you do that. You're presenting more of a business plan than you are just a fundraising ask.
Okay.
Would also say to echo that, it's like finding these natural points of connection and finding opportunities to reach out to folks, potential supporters, tied to things that you know them to be interested in. And I think that's where finding these little moments to give updates, I think is really helpful and important. And also sort of saying on the other side, like, I'd love to get a cup of coffee together, or I'd love to have the opportunity to give you a call at a time that's most convenient for you, and just like share a little bit more around what's going on. So that way, there's a level of formality to it, but it's also really an opportunity for you to engage in a conversation and not only share what's going on, but get a sense of, what their reaction is to it and what they want to hear more about, because I think that will begin to reveal where there's alignment in terms of the work that's being done for the festival and their fundraising interests.
And I'll also chime in as far as email versus in person, et cetera. I think it's always ideal to have in-person meetings if you can. It's just more personable. And in some cases, again, the email intro is the first step. And then from there, you want to request a meeting date in that introductory email. I always do that when I send out emails. And I'll say, do you have any availability to meet within the next 2 weeks? And they'll usually respond saying, oh, I'm free on this day. It may even be 3 weeks out, but at least they know that I really do want to get on their calendar. And then from there, in some of my meetings, they've been out of state, so we'll do Zoom. But, if you're in the same town, then you can just, like Elena said, meet up for coffee and have that face-to-face conversation.
I'm curious to get y'all's opinion on how long do you take before you think it's the right time? I know sometimes it's not always an equation, but like in terms of getting to asking for money, how many meetings do you think that requires? Like how many interactions would you say?
I'll let you go, Loretta. I see you reaching for it.
Go ahead, Haley. Go ahead.
It really does depend. And I wish there were a more concrete answer I can give, and maybe Loretta might have a different viewpoint. But in some instances where I was with a director in a conversation about fundraising, the ask was in there in that first conversation. And, maybe after the subsequent conversation where we followed up with more information, it may have materialized a little bit later after that, but it was, just very direct. Like, this is what we're doing. This is the money we're seeking. We know that you all have funded X, Y, and Z before. We'd love for you to partner with us on that. In some cases, that makes sense and it can work out. In other cases, when you're having introductory meetings where you have a little bit more time to cultivate a relationship that you can see as being long-term, and you really want to get to know the donor, get to know their interests, that fundraising number may not come out in that first conversation, but it may happen over a couple of conversations. But once you start kind of getting a sense for whether or not they're really warm and into this idea of supporting, then when you're providing additional information and you give them the number and you ask if they are willing to support, you'll kind of know the right timing.
And I would chime in there, understanding what investment looks like for a particular donor. This of course isn't one size fits all. And so, you understand, of course, what your needs are for the festival, but understanding sort of, what it means for them to invest, what amount do they want to invest? And some of that we can get just by looking at, previous giving history, and perhaps even more specifically, previous giving history to, let's say other festivals or initiatives that are, or projects that are similar to yours. But really that those initial conversations are an opportunity to sort of just gain a deeper understanding of not only their passion and their interest, but also what investment looks like and means to them, and what a long-term partnership is. I think to Loretta's point, really, mapping out early that this is a relationship that you want to continue, you want to work with them to grow your festival.
And I would add one more thing. It's so much fun talking to my colleagues because I'm learning from them, and it's great because when you're talking on a Zoom, you forget one of the things to say, but keep a sense of humor about it. Keep a sense of competition about it. One of the most famous, one of the best fundraising stories I ever heard was this lady, and it was a great deal of money. And she went to commit a very large amount of money, but she found out somebody else had committed just a hair more. And she goes, well, damn that. I want to be number one. So it's learning that, I don't care, even if you're talking to two car dealers. Let's go to a small town, and you have two car dealers. That's a great competition. That is a great competition. Do you want to be the only car dealer when you need to pay a little bit more for exclusivity? There's a lot of different angles. It's a lot psychological. I mean, it is psychology. It is as a fundraiser, you're a complete psychologist in the fact that you need to read your person. You may have a person that was able to give last year, and because of your relationship, you ask them, and they don't want to admit to you they didn't make that money this year. But you can learn, you can become a friend with that person, and that's fine. And you go, well, we still like your name on it, and you trust this person. Make it 3 payments. You don't have to give it all at one time. So it's really learning to be comfortable that you're not asking for money. You're providing your community with a great product, and somebody has to do it.
I love that. The competition thing is fun. I experienced that it wasn't in a little community, but it was in the Armenian American community. And when I got deeper into it, I saw that people got competitive with each other, and I started letting people know who had given. And it was really interesting. Like, when they saw, I had a couple donors that actually increased what they gave when they saw that another organization had given more, because they're like, well, our organization should definitely be seen at that tier. And so I think you can actually, I've experienced that, and I can imagine that also working in a small community, because especially when you can link your festival also to a cause and something that you all really care about, something that has that shared importance. We talked during the workshops about the concept of what it is that the festival is presenting. And so really rallying behind that, what it means to folks, I think can also help kind of ignite that friendly competition to make sure that the whole community is a part of it. And that means the business community too, and folks that have resources to contribute. I just saw a note from Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Example of letters, email, thanking donors for support. Oh, you're asking because I put in you mean related to the credits that I dropped in there? Can you say a little more, Tammy, of what you're asking?
Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. We just recently had some folks donate stuff to us, and we're kind of just starting our nonprofit. And, they donated during an event that we were at, just sharing about our project. And so, I was just wondering, like, when you all think these people are, do you just thank them, and then you just tie them in with some other, you can continue to support us by this, or, like, how do you keep that person captured since they've already donated, and maybe it wasn't a lot and it was for the moment. At that particular time, it was a cash donation, not a check or anything, but to try and, kind of siphon more off of them. I guess I don't want to say it like that, but you know what I mean? They donated, they had interest, they left their information, and we want to now thank these people if there's some kind of way you all triage that kind of donation.
Great question. Who wants to tackle? How do we convert?
You can't thank anyone enough. If someone has gone out of their way to give you something, you give them a thank you note or pick up the phone call, or I don't care if it's a 2-sentence email or if it's a text. Thanks. This was great. What a great surprise. Look forward to working with you in the future. Simple. You've thanked them and you've set the future like you're not going away. Then you start building the relationship. Just like someone else mentioned, give them updates. Hey, let this, what you gave us allowed us to do this, or it it helped X amount of people. And going again back to, I'm a stat girl. I want numbers. If they gave you 10 rolls of toilet paper, they helped 6 people. I don't know. I'm joking a little bit, but I'm really quite serious. Or it helped 3 families. I'm not sure what your nonprofit is, but thank them, lay the future, and then come back to them and go, we're thinking about doing this because it's going to make us grow. Again, that growth word. And would you be willing to help? So I'm very much simplifying, and I'm sure my other colleagues can make it much more eloquent, but that's my first thoughts.
Thanks, Loretta. I even stepping back a little bit, I'm thinking just from an organizational standpoint, Tammy, from knowing where you all are in your journey. I do remember the work that you're doing. And I was just thinking, even just something like even a starting point, if you don't have it already, an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document that has that person's name, their contact information, and what the contribution was in the date, and just starting to track those kinds of things to make sure that whenever you're going to do anything, whether it's an event or, sharing out news or information, that those people are part of your contact list. Just so that you don't forget. Because it's like one of those things we talked about during the sessions of like, whatever you think you're going to remember, you never actually do. So it's like they're having some tools, using the tools to make sure that you remember what those folks did. And then kind of, you can build that kind of becomes your tracker even for your donors, is that can kind of evolve into being your fundraising tracker, because those are the people they've given to you once. They believe in what you're doing. So keep them informed and bring them along for the journey. Treat them as, as a part of the mission, a part of what you're trying to accomplish. Haley,
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Elena?
No, I would say I absolutely agree with that. And I think, in this realm of thinking and recognition, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I mean, certainly, sending an email, writing a note of thanks costs nothing. But I loved Lakeisha's example of, framing a memento of the T-shirt from their festival. We do a lot of sort of bespoke gifts to our donors who have, given us so much. And really, it's mementos that are sentimental, that help them, think about, remind them of their support and contributions to our work. So I think, sometimes, honestly, we all have different relationships with our donors. Because I work with a board, there's some board members I'm a bit closer with. And so, I'll be inside of an exhibition and see a piece that reminds me of them. Or let's say you're just thinking of a festival, for instance, maybe one of the rehearsals, and you snap a few photos and just say, very excited, to see you at the actual festival. Here's some of what's going on. I think there's really small things that you can do to get them and keep them excited and engaged in the work that's being done. And then again, finding really unique ways to thank them. Of course, it can be sort of a plaque or a certificate, but also if there's something from the festival, a poster that's signed by, artists and the festival, the t-shirt example, a signed program. I think there are ways to use some of the collateral or, merchandise products that already exist, and just make it special for those that have provided support. So I think personalizing where you can is great. And, sometimes the small touches are as big as can have the same impact as some of the bigger thank yous. And then the other thing I was just going to say and chime in with is, as you think about sort of your thank you letters, identifying who in your organization does the thanking. In some cases, it is me. In some cases, it's me and, perhaps like a director. Sometimes it's the artistic director. So, perhaps having a tiered system to think about who should be thanking director and tweaking those messages ever so slightly between those that are doing the acknowledgements to continue that crescendo of thank yous.
And adding in that column, have I thanked them? Checking it off on your spreadsheet so especially if you're working with a team, having something shared, right? So that it's been taken care of. It's like very soothing to know that has happened. Awesome. I'm learning a lot. All right. Any other questions from the group or experiences, struggles? I know there was one question. I think that it came from Kathy. Although it says she's with Uplift. I want to learn about various funding sources available to North Carolina festivals. That's an Uplift question. So I want to say none of us across the group here from Smithsonian have much of an idea about the funding available to North Carolina festivals, but I know that Uplift has a team that's also working on those sorts of things. There's Hessa. Hi. Do you want to speak to that at all quickly about what Uplift is doing in terms of helping identify funding sources?
Yeah, so that's interesting you say that because Kathy is our loans manager, loans and grants manager. And what she does is she searches everywhere in North Carolina for ways to fund either festival or events. And we put it up in our knowledge center once we have that data. But if you guys have any recommendations that you guys have applied to and have gotten those grants that you want to share with the communities, I think that was more of her idea.
Got it.
The information from the participants. We would love to have that because I'm sure everybody here would love to know what those are. And so if you need help with specific events, of a specific grants for your events, reach out to Kathy, as she is the one working one-on-one with people in trying to have those grants be available for you guys, or at least just research. So I'm sure most of you guys don't have the time to spend hours trying to find grants. So she's a great resource on that.
Is it okay if I put that Uplift NC email in the chat?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll put in her direct email as well.
Okay.
Both emails will definitely reach her.
Great. And I did also drop a link in there to the Knowledge Center because I think it's such an incredible tool that you all are building at Uplift that has all the resources from our workshops. And as Hessa was saying, the funding resources, market trends, tourism business incubator. That's where you find all the information from our trainings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of
will also be up there as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's really wonderful to have all these resources available to everyone. All right, well, we have about 15 more minutes. I have a question. If you all don't, I'm going to ask a question. All right. What do you think about So this question's for Alina, Haley, and Loretta. I know at Smithsonian, we don't really we have very limited use of Kickstarter and crowdfunding and online campaigns. And so my question has two parts, and one is about online platforms and how effective you feel they are in doing this kind of work, if you have any experience and can speak to that. The other piece of it is about events, and Haley will smile because we've been talking about this one a lot lately. Do you feel like fundraising events are effective, and what advice might you give for folks in small communities if a fundraising event might make sense, or if it's something that people maybe want to steer clear of? Curious if y'all have thoughts on either of those topics.
I can chime in. I mean, I am less familiar with the digital fundraising, although I do think those platforms can be effective if your organization allows them. As Holly said, it's at the Smithsonian, it's a little more complicated to use some of these platforms, but I do think they are worth looking into as a tool because I think candidly people are really comfortable giving on their phones now or giving online. And so in some ways, what I say is that making it easy for folks, I think is half the battle. So I do think online can be effective there. And then what I'll say about events fundraising, because that's a lot of the work that I'm familiar with. I think that events are a great way to really build energy and momentum around the work that's being done in an organization or in a festival. I always say you want to sort of look at your budget for events and making sure, they're never cheap to say the least. But, I think that they help build momentum in a way that can be a little more difficult or a little more abstract. Using other mediums to do that. And again, I think they're a really wonderful opportunity to not only find and source new donors, but thank, those that have supported your work over the years. So I think they can be used as both a cultivation tool and a stewardship tool when you're looking at fundraising events. And I think that could be as big as a gala. It could also be something that's a little more casual, reception style. I think using, particularly if it's around the festival or if it's at the halfway mark, let's even say, to kind of continue to get folks excited about the work. Perhaps finding a local restaurant that's willing to sponsor, let's say, 2 hours of a reception and, making sure there's some remarks perhaps by leadership within your organization, volunteer leadership, and then artistic leadership if possible, but using it as an opportunity to really, evangelize your message.
I would also think about who you want in the room when you're putting on these sort of events, and some of the I would give you some concrete strategies about how you can approach putting on an event that would have the right people in the room. So if you are thinking about connections that you don't have, you can approach maybe your local city council member and talk to them about how you really want to, elevate the culture in the region. And, everyone knows those sort of opportunities can drive tourism, et cetera. But on a very small scale, if you speak with someone like a local council member, that might be an opportunity for them to give remarks at your event, and that could draw more people in. And ultimately, they want to be visible in these sort of opportunities where they can get in front of community members, especially if they're going up for re-election. So that's an opportunity for you to engage with someone who has a broader reach. And if they attend the event, they may have their social media person tweet about it, or they might share out a flyer to their email list, and people say, oh, that seems like a pretty serious opportunity to show up, meet some people, support a local event that I think would be meaningful to the community. So that's one way of thinking about it. And then with something like a digital campaign, Kickstarter and those sort of crowdfunding websites have been successful in fundraising for different cultural events. I think it's really just a matter of thinking about how much you want to raise by what very short window of time you're trying to raise money in. And then once you set that number and the actual deadline, I think the way Kickstarter works is if you do meet your fundraising goal, then you get all the money. But if you don't, I don't think you get the money. I know there are a few different platforms and they have different rules. So just make sure you know what the rules are. And then usually they'll have some sort of giveaways. Like if you donate $50, you get, a tour of the festival. If you donate $100, then you get, a private meet and greet with a chef, or, whatever the case may be. You can kind of deliver on some of the offerings depending on how much people are donating, and that can help to drive up the numbers of your digital campaign. So those are two concrete ways that you can approach getting people in the room. And even if you don't, let's say I use the example of a council member, but you can also go to them for connections as well. Like, they know people in the community, they obviously fundraise. So they may know someone who would be helpful to you as you are trying to get support for your event, who may want to host a dinner in their home or in their backyard and, have a group of people from their networks come and support. So those are a few different strategies that you can use.
Very helpful. Thank you, Haley.
I have a question.
And recognize you. Go ahead, please.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. Oh, you were gonna share more. I was gonna say some examples of the type of event that you would use for fundraising. Like, I mean, you mentioned that. Do you all do fundraising events for your folklife festivals and all that? And what would that event look like? What's like it? How is it themed? And you mentioned trying to get a specific target market that you want within the room when you're doing that. But in terms of what does the event look like? Is it what are the themes of the event that you're using to do the fundraising?
It would be specifically for the festival. It's really important that you're clear with people so they know exactly what they're supporting. And I'm thinking in terms of the lead up to the festival event, so that you can secure funds to actually execute and do, whatever it is that you need to do to actually make sure that the festival comes to life. But you want to make sure you have that money in hand beforehand. So I was thinking about the lead up, but on site, if you wanted to do a reception, some sort of, maybe dinner the night before it opens, like a festival opening event, a festival concert, you can really get creative with it. There are no hard and fast rules. It's really about knowing your audience and what you think would move them and make them, what would compel them to support. But those are just some of the examples, but there's a lot of room for creativity.
I would agree with Haley. Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for creativity. I think that's where messaging becomes really important. I think, having speakers that are amplifying, I think the message of the festival, the importance of the festival, and then, throughout your speakers, whether they be internal, staff leadership or external volunteers, if you have them speaking as well, having everyone sort of be on message, having being coordinated in how they're talking about the work and the importance of the work. I also just think whenever there's an opportunity to bring in a content expert for an event, I really feel like it is compelling and it brings your donors or prospective donors closer to the work. So whether that be an artist or a curator or someone who is artistic director, someone who's working very closely with the content, I think that is always a wonderful thing to include in an event. But I think in terms of format, it could be truly anything, but having opportunities to message the importance of the work, the importance of the festival, and the importance of volunteers, importance of supporters.
I want to note there's a little side convo from Lakeisha and Eileen on the chat here about confession. I hate this part of my job. And Eileen said, I agree. It's not the fun part of festival planning for me. I will say, I spoke with you all about my experience with Armenia, and I think the thing that shifted it for me, I was very intimidated. I was like, I did know a lot about the content and I cared a lot about the content, but I was really intimidated to go to people and ask for money. And I felt a little embarrassed too, because I was like, it's the Smithsonian. Their expectations are going to be that we have resources for this. Like, What is that going to look like? But once I got started, what I realized is that the fundraising piece of it is also about building community. If you approach it as an activity about building community, which is it's at the core of all this festival work that you all do, but you're widening out the circles. And it's the same as like, you want creative people at your festival. You need businesses and sponsors to support your festival, and they're a part of it. Once I shifted my perspective towards thinking there's something in it for them, like recognizing that they could feel a part of this as well, that community piece is what kind of shifted me away from the part of like, I don't want to ask for money, but it was inviting people to become a part of this thing that you're building that's really meaningful to people. And I think the more that you can stay in touch with that and keep your communication about that, and also again on the relationship aspect, which we've talked a lot about during the session, of like, these are people, they're people, and they care and they want to be a part of it. So the extent to which you can build your relationship with them, bringing them into the festival and sharing the wins of the festival with them, it'll start to feel a little bit less like that. I mean, at the end of the day, when we had all these donors that came to the festival, they were celebrating with us, they were partying, they were over there listening and doing the dancing and all the things, like, because they felt that this was something that they helped create, and that they also saw themselves in it. So I think if it's possible to kind of shift that mindset away from thinking of it as purely like fundraising and asking for money, and thinking of it as another extension of the work you're doing in building the community around your festival, it can help take away a little bit of the icky factor.
And people also give for intrinsic value. There's a good feeling that people have when they give to others. And so if you keep that in mind, especially as you speak with these corporate or individual philanthropists, corporations have designated budgets just to give to the community. And essentially you're asking, well, can you direct some of it here, because it would support a really amazing program in the community. And then with individual philanthropists, some of them are deeply, deeply committed to serving their communities and have an abundance to share. And so giving money or supporting, organizations in their community is a really, really good feeling for them. And it helps them to, have a sense of purpose. So there are definitely people who care about community and want to be supportive. So as you're going out and meeting different, organizations, different people, you have to keep that in mind too. So that's the flip side of it. One side is like you're pulling teeth to get money. I know that can feel uncomfortable. It's like, they told me no. But on the other side of it, people are waiting to be asked. And you'd be surprised at how many people are just waiting for someone to ask them to give money.
And I have to jump in here and say one thing, and I'm going to encapsulate the fundraising events and the online fundraising. Recognize your bandwidth. You must recognize your bandwidth in order to know what can be done. And creating a separate fundraising event takes a lot of time. I don't care how, if you have someone in your community that wants to do something for you, that's terrific. You let them do the work. That way they're part of it. If you have a particular thing that's really exciting, I think that's when I've seen online work. As far as online fundraising or just crowdsourcing for a festival in general, I'm not sure if that's going to be exciting enough unless you have some people that are going to put money down. And again, that competition. So I really underline, it's more important, just like Haley just said, that you become part of the community and people want to give to you rather than you go off and do all these tangential things that take away from the power that you're putting towards your event.
Yeah, stay close to the mission, stay close to the people that you're serving. I think that's a wonderful way to kind of close this out. I feel like it's, we all know when we're getting too far from what motivates us in the work. So the closer that you can stay into the reason why and the people that you're serving and with the time that you're spending, I think that's so important. And taking care of ourselves. Because I know in all the sessions when we went around the room and I asked how many people are doing this as volunteers, and almost everybody raised their hands. We do this work because it matters and because we love it. We're passionate about it, not because we're paid to do it. So we also have to be mindful of all the different hats we wear in our lives, with our families, with our work, our paid work, and our passion work. And so being mindful of that and your team and what the capacities are, and trying to keep it in check, keep it balanced if you can. It's very good advice. All right, Hessa, I think we have reached our 3:30. That was a great session.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for your questions, and thank you, the Smithsonian team, for taking the time to have this conversations. I'm sure it was very informative and beneficial to those who are here, and hopefully to those who watch it later on. If you guys have any more questions or would like to discuss something else, feel free to email us. But for now, that is all.